Welcome to the Document Right AI live stream. This is where we get a chance to talk about AI, we get to talk about what it means for technical writers, and we get to talk to cool people. So, briefly, my name is Portia. We have Charles Rizal. Uh, we Rizal's from GitHub. We're going to talk about that. Charles and I, we represent Document Right. Document Right. We are a documentation agency, and we create technical documentation for startups and tech companies. And before we begin, we have a newsletter for folks who are interested in AI. So if you are interested in AI and technical writing, I should add the technical writing part, then you can go into the notes and subscribe to our newsletter. And later on this year, we'll have a course. So, Charles, was that everything? Did I miss something?
You got it all. Good job.
I want stars, please. Thank you. I like affirmation. All right. So, without further ado, we have Rizal. Yay! From GitHub. Balloons,
Hey.
balloons, balloons. So
Yeah.
I'll give
Hey,
a
thanks for
brief.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We're going to give a brief introduction, and Rizal, we'd like you to fill in the blanks. So
Mm,
Rizal works at, she's a developer advocate at GitHub, and
mhm,
the project that she mostly works on is GitHub Copilot. So
mhm.
she travels all around the world, the country, teaching people about how to use Copilot and how it's not going to take your jobs today. Rizal, please fill the blanks.
That was basically it. But no, yeah. I am a developer advocate at GitHub. I've been here for maybe like a year, 9 months, or a year and 10 months. Before that, I was like just a pure software engineer. But when I started advocating for like how to get started in open source if you're a new contributor, or how to like better maintain your projects, and just listening to maintainers and contributors alike and figuring out how we could better support them. But in the meantime, as I started to get more like familiar with GitHub, I started getting into like GitHub code spaces, GitHub Actions, and GitHub Copilot, and I saw that a lot of the there was a lot of nervousness on Twitter about GitHub Copilot, where like people were wondering, will it take their jobs, or they were thinking maybe it's stealing their code, or they felt like it wasn't really generating output that was helpful to them. So I did like a lot of experimentation with Copilot to figure out like how can it truly like be helpful. And then that's when I started doing like talks and blog posts to kind of help people learn as I learned on like how to use GitHub Copilot best. Yeah.
That is a great introduction. And I would also like to say that Rizal is an amazing content creator.
Thank you.
Yesterday, it's true. Yesterday, she wrote a phenomenal blog post on about technical blogging. The one thing I
Yeah.
really liked were her outlines, like how to go viral. I feel like you were burying the lead. Like everyone wants to go viral, but the outlines and everything she wrote in that past article is very actionable. All right,
Thank
everything else
you.
now will be about Copilot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we'll leave that in the notes too, the article, so that everyone can check it out. Charles, you want to kick us off with the questions?
Yeah. I think. Thank you, Rizal. That was a great introduction. Perhaps you could start us off with calming our nerves, as you referred to in your introduction. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, some of us are quite suspicious about the rise of the machines. So it would be nice to for you to calm us a bit.
Yeah, I could try. So just about general AI or about GitHub Copilot specifically?
GitHub Copilot.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So for folks who don't know, like GitHub Copilot is an AI like programming assistant, we like to call it. So essentially, when you type some code or you write a comment, it tries to like predict what you are going to write or help you to write code a little bit faster, based on the context that it's been given from like whatever file you have with the code and the comments. I One of the things that I think can help calm your nerves is that GitHub Copilot can't work without the developer. Like the developer has to be able to either understand like logic and to actually be typing, or if we also have like a voice control one too, but you have to be able to be dictating to GitHub Copilot what it should do and when it should do it. I think some people, when it first came out, they felt like, oh my gosh, GitHub Copilot is going to do all the work for me. But like it can't generate any code if you don't type or like don't dictate anything to it. So that's one thing, like it still needs you. That's why they called it Copilot, right? Like it's not an autopilot. It's not just gonna start
That's
writing out the code.
hilarious.
So
I
people are
love
like,
that.
oh my gosh.
That's why
But
they
like
call it
it
pro,
has,
not autopilot. That's awesome.
right. And in addition to that, right, like it still can't really understand logic without you, right? Like you have to be able to be like, oh, okay, here's what I probably would want to do next, and so on and so forth. Like I encourage beginners to use it, but not beginners who don't know like the logic of different programming languages. Like maybe you're a beginner to Python, but you've already written JavaScript, or maybe you've like done a coding boot camp or something like that. You still need to have some understanding of logic, because GitHub Copilot, you can't just get GitHub Copilot to generate whatever you want without like guiding it in the right direction. And what's my other thing? Dang, my brain just forgot it. But essentially, like it needs you as the developer to be able to generate the code. Oh, here's the other thing. Is sometimes like I always am honest with people that it's not always going to generate like accurate code. A lot of times it does, where you're like, dang, it's reading my mind, but sometimes it may have an older API version, like or larger data from an older API version, so it might like suggest code from that. So it's good to have you as a developer to review the code and make sure what it's generating is right, just as you would with like a human peer programmer. You got to do the same with like an AI peer programmer. So hopefully that calms people's nerves a little bit.
That's so sentimental. It still needs you. You still have value professionally.
Because I know a lot of people are like, they're gonna take my job. I'm like, I don't think we're there yet.
I love how you add it yet.
I don't know the future. So I don't want to go on the board of like me saying that'll never happen. But from right now, like I don't see that happening right
That's a very diplomatic answer. No, I'll stop.
now.
You mentioned that this. So the one thing I will say, it seems like that you need to be still a domain expert
Yeah.
in like JavaScript or Python in order to get the full benefit of GitHub Copilot.
Mhm. I think you need to be I think you need to just understand logic in general. Like I've used GitHub Copilot to write a lot of Python, like not logic, but like computer logic.
Yeah,
I've
no,
used
we know,
GitHub
like the
Copilot to
basics
write,
of programming.
yeah, because I don't know Python. I'm not like a expert in Python at all. I'm just like I kind of know what I would need to do in for this program to work. So I'll just like tell it stuff. I'll be like, all right, next step, I want to be able to like do this and then that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, okay, I want to be able to do a get request for this API. I don't know how to set it up in Python, but can't I'll write a comment that'll say that, or a post request. So it's not necessarily being a domain expert in a
I
specific
see what you
language,
mean.
but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I take the expert out. I actually use Copilot. I actually use Copilot. I keep telling everyone this because I'm very proud of myself. I created a PHP plugin. I have a WordPress plugin. Charles knows all about
Hey.
this. Yeah. Um, I know nothing about PHP, and I was able to get it to work, and it just felt so empowering. It just felt
Right.
like it was the tutor that I needed for years.
Right. Yeah, I like the way that you said that. It's like the tutor, like, cause I feel like it's a superpower sometimes. I'm like, oh man, or like you said, tutor, right? Like sometimes you want to ask someone a question, but you're like, I don't want to bother them with mad questions all day long. And you kind of have this as like a little bit of a guide that, like, yeah, you're going in the right direction. Keep doing you. You're like, all right, cool.
Keep doing you. I mentioned tutor because I actually hired a tutor on
Oh,
Upwork. back in
Oh,
2020 because I don't know what my problem is, but I'm not a great developer.
no. Yeah.
I'm not a great developer. There are just things that I miss, and
Mhm.
so I like coding, but my skill never really got me to the level I wanted to. So I actually went out and got a
Mm,
tutor, and the
yeah.
tutor was real made me feel bad about myself. It was
No.
like, yeah, I was like, well, you should study all this stuff about like context. It's like I know I'm missing some knowledge, and that's why
I
I have
hired you.
hired you, but now that I
Yeah.
have tools like GitHub Copilot, it's just super friendly and forgiving. And no, seriously, it's a tutor that I wish I got back in 2020.
Yeah, no, I relate with you. Because I do come from like a non-traditional background, like starting off in a coding boot camp, and afterwards I did go to college, but I still had that experience of like being at work. Like I like coding, but I will relate to it you and say I don't think I'm the greatest engineer ever. But like yeah, being at work and being like, how do I do this? And they'll be like, did you Google it? And I'm like,
I
yeah, for like
know,
over 3 hours.
I know. I come from a very non-traditional background. I don't use non-traditional because I feel
Yeah,
like at least throwing out numbers here. I feel like at least 40% of developers just picked it up, but some people
yeah.
feel like they have to say, "Oh, I'm non-traditional." I actually started my career as an English teacher. So I did that
Mm.
for 7 years, and then I figured
Oh.
out I wanted to become a developer, and I am self-taught.
Mm.
So, yes. So there's still things that I don't get, and plus it's an interest thing because I remember what it felt like when I wasn't a
Yeah,
programmer. Like
yeah,
I remember what it felt like to want to do things and build things and not being able to. So I guess I'm more about the end result as opposed to the journey. And many of the
yeah,
people that I've met at meetups or who I asked to help me, they're very much about code for code's sake. And I have a really
yeah,
hard time
yeah,
identifying with that.
yeah. Me too. Some people they just want they're like, "Oh, is that the most performance complex way to do things?" I'm like, "Who cares? Like, does it work?" So, yeah, but I agree with you. Like, I like ChatGPT. I like now I have access to Copilot Chat because I'm staff. Just being able to be like, "Hey, what should I do next? What do you think?" And like it just giving me ideas. I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool." Like I feel like it's very empowering.
Charles, how have you been? Oh, Charles, have you been experimenting with Copilot?
Yeah, I've been using it for a little bit of some programming stuff I was doing. But Rizal, you said something interesting. Copilot chat. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So, in addition, so for people who are just gonna give background. Basically, we have GitHub Copilot itself. That's the one where you like write comments or function, and then it gives you a suggestion. But we also came out with Copilot X, which is just a marketing term, to be honest, to to basically talk about like this bundle of other like maybe more experimental features that we're coming out with GitHub Copilot. So Copilot Chat is one of them, and that experience is very similar to ChatGPT because you're kind of talking with an AI assistant. But the biggest difference is that it's an extension in like Visual Studio Code, so it's like right there in your editor, so you're not leaving to go to your browser, and then it also has context of like your open file rather than being like, because I know for ChatGPT, you got to like copy and paste your code and then be like, oh, this is what I did, this is what I changed. Like Copilot Chat can just see that. Like I've tried it out. I built a markdown editor with it and I like asked it to like make it look pretty. And it was like, okay,
Nice.
here's the styled components, CSS stuff for you. Do the like I asked it to create tests for me. It was awesome. Yeah. And but
Wow,
there's a wait
awesome.
list. Sorry.
Can I ask you a question that might be out of bound?
Let's see.
Do you have GitHub Copilot like up and running now?
Oh, up and running right now. Let's see. I can get it up and running. Is it to do like a demo or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Give me.
would. I know this is on the spot, so you could say nah, but or you can give us a link to some of your talks. but could you show us, I don't know, GitHub Copilot doing something cool like creating a unit test?
Okay, give me a second. I can probably do the Markdown editor one. I just need
Yeah, can we
to
see the Markdown
log
editor
in.
one, please?
Yeah, let me open this up.
Because
It's loading. So,
okay, because the thing is, like, I think a lot of people who are critical about GitHub Copilot, they haven't really seen it in action.
I think so too. That's why I started doing those talks, because I was like, I understood some people's critiques, but I was like, sounds like you never used it before. So yeah. Give me a second.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like you're
will.
criticizing something you have no experience in.
Yeah. Let me.
So yeah,
Um.
while you're
Compose.
pulling that up,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why we like a demo too, we've actually talked to the folks at Cody, and
Oh,
yeah, so
interesting.
we really would love to know like what makes Cody and GitHub Copilot similar, and like what makes those two like different.
Interesting. I have never um used Cody yet, so I'm curious too. All right, I'm gonna
Cody's
share my
not bad.
screen now.
Okay. Oop, I hear a beep. That's promising.
Do you guys see anything?
I need to switch
Oh,
to my
not yet.
screen. Okay, cool.
Cool. All right. If it's shared to the rest of the group, or is it just to you? Because I don't see it on this screen.
There
No,
is
it's
a
not yet.
delay. Oh, wait, no, we're not sharing it. I'm gonna share it now.
Yeah.
There we go. Oops, oops.
Yeah, there we go. Because I was
Yeah,
like,
there
I
we go.
pressed here. Cool. All right.
Teamwork,
So
dreamwork.
I don't know if this is big enough for. I zoomed in even more. I'm actually just gonna. I have this open in a code space as well, so that it could run this browser on the side. I'm just gonna stop running it and start over, and then I
Okay.
can give y'all the rundown. Basically, everybody uses Copilot in a different way. What I like to do when there's like no like it's an empty code base, nothing in any file, is I do like to give like an overall, like I do like to write a comment with the overall like high level goal or purpose of like what I want to do. It might be a little excessive, but I find it to be helpful because now Copilot knows what I'm trying to do. So here I was like, I want to make a basic markdown editor. We're gonna maybe even create tests and stuff like that, like you just said. But I'm like, I
Mhm.
want to make a basic markdown editor in Next.js. I want to use React hooks. I want it to have like default text that says type markdown here. And I want like to have a live preview. I want it to support headers, bold, italics, and I want to use the React Markdown NPM package. So let's see if that works. So I pressed enter. It's already like saying, okay, you want to use the use state hook like you said. You want to use that React Markdown NPM package, and now it's going to start trying to building out the component for me. So I just got to wait for it to finish spinning, and let's see. It should export it for me next. There we go. Because I've done this before, I do see one little small error, but it's not a big deal. I don't think the component for React Markdown is supposed to look like that. So let's see if it resolves itself. It did. The markdown should be in the middle right there, like that prop or that state. And then if I refresh, it should give me like an ugly looking um editor. If not, I'm just gonna start this over one more time just to make sure. Or I can open it up here.
So the comment is actually you writing a prompt to
Yeah,
Copilot.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I that's like I've been like experimenting with GitHub Copilot a lot, and I'm like, to be honest, like using your comments as a prompt is really helpful. But like, yeah, like doing stuff like this helps it to just go in the right direction, and you have to do like way less. You can also like one by one like change it. Like for example, like you can iterate on it or do even more specific comments. Like for example, it seems to have missed the fact that I said I wanted the default text to say type markdown here rather than markdown preview. So like I would say make default state uh type markdown here, and then if I delete this, I'm hoping that it'll get that. Cool. It changed it based on like how it updated my prompt. And do this. And like, so this is a really ugly, this is ugly, right? So this is where I can show you guys like how Copilot chat could either help us to generate unit tests and to make this even look a little bit better. This
Please
is not
do.
markdown. Yeah. So y'all get the gist. This works, but it just looks ugly.
Amazing.
So I'm gonna ask it to let's say can highlight this. Can we make or please propose the code to make my markdown editors UX or have a more modern UX design. And then I want to specifically use styled components. That way I can just put it all in this file and not make a new file because I'm lazy. Please use the styled components package. Okay, it's gonna think. I think it might take a little bit. Oh no, it did it quickly. sometimes when I do a demo, that's when it decides to take forever, and I'm like, you're embarrassing me. What'd you say?
Oh, that's for many demos, it's not just a Copilot.
I'm like, not today. Okay, so I'm gonna paste this in. I might have an error if style components is not installed, but we'll see. Oh, cool. It was already installed. But it tried to do its best with like making what it thinks could be like a slightly more improved like markdown editor, and I can keep iterating on it, like saying like make like add a toolbar, like I've done that, or I told it like create a dark mode and a light mode. But now we can probably also try to have it generate what is it called? Unit tests for us, like you asked. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna open up Copilot chat. And we have like slash commands in here. So instead of me like having to type out that I want it to like me like asking a full question, I can just say slash test and it'll generate some tests for me. So we can see that it's generated a test to check that the markdown editor is actually rendered, and it updates and it's also checking that the preview actually is updated when the markdown is changed. So that's just like a small demo of like how I've tried to like optimally use GitHub Copilot so that I'm like whatever comment I write, I'm getting the like output that I want.
Wow, this is amazing.
I know.
Like,
Cool.
you got a lot done in like literally in like a minute.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So I'm gonna veer a little bit
Yeah.
off
I
script
can
here.
stop sharing.
So do you recommend like for example, I'm not familiar with React. I'm familiar with other JavaScript frameworks. So
Yes.
for someone who does have a little bit of experience and they want to learn like a new framework or a new language, would you recommend a tool like this, or would it end up being a crutch that like you end up not really knowing the framework or language?
Well, that's a question that people have asked me a lot. I'm like, I'm not sure on how other people's brains work, but I've used it for like C# and like I told you already, Python, and I guess it could look like um that like maybe I use it as a crutch, but I think now I'm more familiar with the different like syntax and terms within those languages because now I'm like, oh, okay, I know that I'm gonna need to um do like import OS for Python, or Python uses like a config file rather than a .m file. So it just helps me to discover how things are being used more. And I think for me, like subconsciously, I'm like absorbing that information. But I don't know how other people are. But like if you know Angular or Vue, I think you would know like, oh, I want to be able to render this component, or I want to be able to store state, but I don't know the exact syntax for it. I think using a comment and then being like, oh, that's how it's done is helpful. And there's still stuff that you'll have to go back and edit. So like I think it's still like you still might have to go back to the documentation or something, and it's like a process of discovery, but at like a faster pace.
Right. Okay. Huh. Thank you for that.
I still can't get over that demo. Like you
Yay.
created a whole app with test in like less than 5 minutes.
It's
No, I
like a
literally.
genie.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it's like a genie. You just tell it, I want this, I want that. Here are my wishes. Make it happen. Huh.
Right. I was gonna say a funny thing is that me and my manager like maybe 2 weeks ago were supposed to like do a demo at Microsoft Build using Copilot and Copilot Chat, and he was like, "Oh man, we didn't like create one yet, and it's running down to the wire." And I was like, "Oh, I can like probably do one with a Markdown editor." And he was like, "Have you ever done that before? That sounds crazy. Like I don't think." And it was supposed to be only like a 15-minute like session where we would like explain Copilot and then do the demo. And he was like, I really don't know if that's going to take the right amount of time. And I was like, no, look, I just did it in like 2 minutes. Like we could do it. So yeah.
I also like the workflows that you demonstrated because I know I was using it like an autocomplete. Like I would just write
Mm,
a function and then I was just waiting for a suggestion, but I didn't know
yeah.
that you can just give it a comment and then it'll actually start giving you suggestions based on the comment.
Yeah. Depending on how well the comment's constructed. But yeah, it can.
That's phenomenal. And the chat box you showed us, is that part of GitHub Copilot X?
Yeah, that's Copilot Chat. It's part of GitHub Copilot X. Right now it's on a wait list. So technically, I guess I'm not supposed to be showing too many people about it, but it's a little exciting. So I'm like, I want to show. It's
Waitlist,
so.
friend, buddy, amiga.
I have no
Hook
control
us
over it. I've been
up.
trying to get people in. I've been like, hey, can we bump this person on the wait list? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay.
Dash my hopes like that. That was actually a question I got when I was in a coffee shop today. So I
Oh,
actually didn't know about GitHub Copilot X, and then I was talking to some random developers. They're like, "Oh, can you please ask about Copilot, GitHub Copilot X?" And yeah,
yeah. It got a lot of cool stuff. It even has like a CLI version, like Copilot for CLI. So like if you're like, yo, I don't remember these commands or how to do a bash script, you just write in natural language. Like you can say, how do I rebase this code or like help me to, I don't know, I can't think of any
like even a
bash
regular
script.
expression.
Yeah. And you can do that in your terminal. And then it'll be like, here's what you want.
Oh my god, so much magic!
I know,
Such a
right?
tool.
Earlier you said that part of the reason the machines aren't going to enslave us all is that it's not yet perfect. So it does make mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, so suppose you're using it in a context where you're not as familiar.
Mhm.
Um, is there a way to kind of intuit that maybe something is wrong here, or how do you navigate that issue where it sometimes makes mistakes?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I usually just I only figure out that's something I'm still working on. But I only figure out that something's wrong when I see an error. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know what happened here. And then I have to go back and read the code and debug on my own. But right now, there's not really like, oh, Copilot recognized that it did an error thing. It's just like either my own eyes being like, oh, that's not what it's supposed to look like, or me seeing an error in my console. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know if that answers it.
Does that make you feel better?
Yeah, feature request for Copilot X.
Another question. Okay, and I'm actually stealing here. I'm stealing a question from Charles.
Okay.
Charles, you know which question I want to ask about the
Uh,
different levels? Because we
Mm.
mentioned
oh yeah.
how, yeah, I'll let you take that, Charles. It's your question, yeah.
Um, so can you provide us with any insights as to like the level of adoption that GitHub Copilot has in the developer community?
Yeah, I could try. I know in the keynote that I did for Universe, um, we said
Congratulations. Yeah.
that 40% of Python developers have been using like all their 40% of the code that Python developers have written has been synthesized by Copilot, meaning like that's the suggestion they accepted for sure, not like they accepted it and then deleted it, right? That's like a large amount. Um, I I think there's a blog post somewhere that talks about like the adoption. So let me see.
By the way,
Productivity.
congratulations on the keynote. That's a big deal.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I was like scared, but when it was done, I was like, yay, I did it. Yeah, we
Oh,
have a
that's so
whole,
nice.
I can send this to you guys in the private chat, but we have this whole like blog post that talks about like how has the developer satisfaction been, and we learned that like 60 to 75% of users feel more fulfilled and like all of that good stuff. I still do find people who have not used it or are not really too familiar with it. Um, but my knowledge of how it's being adopted is from this blog post.
All right.
That's
Okay. Thank
amazing.
you. That's really helpful. Yeah.
No problem.
Another question we wanted to ask is in terms of like the coding level of the user. Like this tool, I feel like is, and you've given presentations on how you can level up as a
Yeah,
developer using
yeah.
Copilot. What about the gains if you are a very experienced developer? Like how can Copilot help you if you have like 10, 15, 20 years worth of experience in a language?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. Things that I've mentioned to people are like just speed overall, right? Like maybe there's like things that it's like the boilerplate code or that repetition that you're always doing over and over again and you want to get work done faster. And we know like staff engineers, they're busy. They're not just writing code. They got to do other stuff as well. So that like to me helps them. And then I've also seen people use Copilot for like documentation, which I think more senior engineers tend to be the ones like ending up writing documentation. We don't like encourage people to use Copilot for like non-code things. But I have seen people use it. just putting that out there. It's been specifically the LLM that it's using has been specifically fine-tuned for code. But I have seen people use it for documentation or even use it to add like code snippets into their code. So I think that's helpful. And then I think I think even don't matter how senior you get, you're never going to know everything within that language or framework. And I think even when you get more senior, you might feel less confident even asking for help because you're like, bro, I'm supposed to know this. So I think there's where the benefits lie.
That's very good. And I mean, seniors, they're people too.
Yeah.
And they feel and they feel insecure. They might get
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. They might feel, oh my gosh, what will people think if I ask this question?
Right.
You touched upon technical writers,
Yeah.
and yeah, could you elaborate more on how can technical writers leverage a GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, I think like I said for the documentation, like I've seen people use it for code snippets. Like I have this, let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find this example. I know that one developer advocate from Microsoft said that half of the documentation that he used or created for like the static web app CLI project, he used with Copilot. But let me see if I can find this so that y'all can see what I mean about using it for documentation. Because I feel like visually it's better to see
Yeah,
it than just me tell.
that makes sense.
Right here. I'm gonna share my screen. Uh, Sorry. Okay, just press share on my screen.
Okay,
Cool.
there we go.
All right. So like you can see here, like this is an example I always like to show is that this guy, my friend on Twitter was using Copilot to write some documentation, and he's like saying like, here's how to install the basic building requirements. He does it for like 2 operating systems, and then for he says on Seuss and GitHub Copilot just like automatically predicts what he needs to write. So that speeds up the process for him. I have used Copilot to write blog posts before, but it's not my favorite. Like I will say that. Like I just feel like I did it as an experiment. I think it was helpful in like the structuring things and making sure like, it was like, okay, you talk about the how, then it suggested I talk about the why or whatever. But the voice was just not mine. I think it was not able to really follow my style of writing. So I will say in that sense, maybe you wouldn't want it. But if you want to add in code snippets, and maybe as a technical writer, you have to add in code snippets for various languages and you don't know all of those different programming languages, here's where it could be helpful. Yeah.
Oh, that's
What about you?
very useful. And
Yeah.
also shows that, humans are still needed.
Yeah. Definitely.
How did you go about that? What does that process even look like? Using Copilot to create a blog post?
Yeah, I mean, I just like open Visual Studio Code. I created a markdown file, and then like I put the title of the blog post I started writing, and then like sometimes I would wait and see what suggestions it would give me, and I'd be like, oh cool. But sometimes the suggestions also would be like inaccurate. Like I'll be like, that's not really what the definition of this thing is, but nice try. But yeah, that's kind of like how I did it. Like I would like type and then see what it gives me. And yeah.
Have you tried like writing a comment? Like, please write a blog post about getting started with
Interesting.
Node. Make it
Interesting.
500 words.
I've never done that. Let me see.
Oh my God. Wait, let's try it now.
Yeah. I don't know if it will work. Let's see.
That's okay. I love toys.
Experimentation. All right,
Okay.
I'm sharing. I'll just use the same one, and maybe I'll just make a markdown file.
Oh, yeah.
Blog.md. Cool. And exit.
Yes. Just tell it
Remove.
like how many words, like 500.
Okay. Please write a blog post about, what was it that you said to write about?
Getting started with Node.
Getting started with Node. Make it 500 words. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, wait. Why is it disabled?
Oh,
Create a function. This is not even related.
we
Yeah,
still have our jobs.
right. Because it's not even doing. I'm like, what are you doing? This is what I mean. It's not really fine tuned. It's code heavy. It's not really fine tuned for writing all the time.
Yeah. Um, okay, yeah, very interesting. I think I saw in one of your talks that you said Copilot is based on OpenAI's Codex. So
Yeah,
like an
but
LLM.
oh, go ahead.
Yep.
Recently,
No,
oh, I think there's a lag, and I think I'm talking
Yeah.
over when. Sorry about that. um,
no worries.
what was I saying? Yes. So initially we started off using Codex, which is like a machine learning an LLM made by
LLM, yeah.
OpenAI. Yeah, thank you. Made by tongue twister for me. But
Open
now we're
AI,
using
yeah.
something called
What are you using?
now we're using Sahara, which is yeah I didn't even realize when we switched it. I was out here telling people about Codex, and I seen my manager in the background like when I was like, oh, but we switched to Sahara. So Codex is based on GPT-3, but Sahara is based on GPT 3.5 Turbo. So I think we just switched to something that will provide better um suggestions because it's more refined and has better context.
Okay. So m- so Sahara is fine-tuned to programming,
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations as to what other LLMs you can use to like augment the coding side to like, supercharge you
Mm.
to that next level?
To be honest, I don't think I do. That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. The things that I've been just using has been just ChatGPT and Copilot, but I probably should do more exploration into other LLMs right now. Good question.
Okay. Thank you for that.
By the way, the whole like manager going like this during a talk, I totally been there.
That's
You
so
know,
funny.
I totally been there. It was interesting because half of the audience that knew I was wrong, they kind of didn't talk to me afterwards. I was discredited.
Oh
It's fine. But the other half who didn't really know were like, "Oh my god, that was a great talk." And so I hung
no.
out with those folks. No,
Same,
I've
feel
totally been
me.
there. But I mean, we all make mistakes,
Right,
and most people won't go up there and actually talk about like what they learned and what they are working on. So you're part of
right.
the 1%.
Yeah, and I think yeah, like I think my manager jumped in, but he didn't do it in a mean way. It was like, oh, it was like yesterday we just switched over to Sahara, so she wouldn't even have known. And
Oh,
I was
and then
like,
it was
yeah,
yesterday. Yeah.
yeah, it was it was quick.
So speaking about Sahara, can you give us, that's not from OpenAI, is it?
It is, but I don't
Oh.
know. I don't think they've. Oh, we're openly like we're openly saying it's built on Sahara, but I don't think they've openly given information about Sahara because I've done a lot of research and I haven't found much. So yeah,
Okay, but
um,
Sahara's part of OpenAI, not like another
yeah,
company.
part of OpenAI. Yeah,
Oh, that's super interesting.
yeah. I think they just made like an upgraded version that's like more refined for Copilot because like they made GPT-3 and that's like for just um for just natural language, like it's just a machine learning natural language thing, and then they or model, and then they're just basing like codecs off of GPT-3. Then they made better like versions of GPT-3 and they based like Sahara off of GPT 3.5. So it's the same company, same organization, but they're just continuing to improve on these models.
Mhm.
So, stealing another Charles question. This is definitely Charles' question, and I am stealing it. How is GitHub Copilot different than someone asking the same questions on
Mhm.
OpenAI, if that makes sense?
Interesting. So like if you're like are you saying like they can just go to OpenAI like website and do that?
Yeah,
Okay,
because
that's a good question.
it's using a similar LLM. It's coming
Yeah,
from the same company. So what kind of bells and whistles are different from GitHub Copilot as opposed to just going straight to OpenAI?
yeah. I think that's a great question. I think for me, the biggest difference or benefit is that there's more context of your entire file. And then can you even install I also think there's like a lot of context switching, right? Because you can't like install like an
Yes.
npm or yarn package. Like I'll have to copy and paste and then copy and paste it back to my editor and see if it works. Just like we do with Chat GPT.
Right.
Um, so that could be annoying. And then like one thing, this is subject to change, but one thing that I have found helpful is that GitHub Copilot takes context from neighboring files. So let's say in one file and you have like an open tab of it, it defines the function. You can in the next tab or the next file that's next to it, like reference that same function pretty easily. I don't think you can necessarily do that in the OpenAI's UI.
Not
Does that make sense?
easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that'll be a lot of copying and pasting.
Yeah.
Follow up to that. So what you're saying is, suppose I have like a React project, and I have several files, so it's aware of the code in all the other files. Do I need to have those files open, or just being in the project is enough for it to collect that information?
Needs to be opened. Like the related relevant files need to be open next to it. From what I read, we do have the ability to give Copilot context of your entire code base. However, we're not doing that yet because we haven't solved the problem of if it has context of all your files, that what we found is that it reduces the performance and the relevance in the suggestions. So we're trying to figure out how do we ignore the files that need to be ignored and make the files that are relevant be part of the context. So for now it's like you have to open up that one relevant file or those two relevant files to be able to like pull in the context to your current file. Does that make sense?
Does it have to be part of the same directory? These files?
They just have to be open within your editor. Like they just have to be
Okay.
open within that same like window in your editor. Yeah.
So they could be any part of the code base. Like one can be, I don't know, under something called docs. Another thing could be under another file can be under source, and those two files will act as a context to each other, even though they're not in the same directory.
Yeah. From my
Okay.
knowledge, yeah. Just gotta make just it's just the open tabs. I've even done it for when I first started using Copilot, and I wasn't too great at the prompt engineering side of it. And sometimes it will like since it's non-deterministic, sometimes like I'll practice the demo and then I'll go up there and it gives me like completely wrong stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh. So what I used to do was like I will have a open tab, and I guess maybe I shouldn't share this, but whatever. I'll have an open tab of like the completed code, and then like I'll open another tab and then I'll do the demo and be like, look at Copilot working. But back then I just didn't like know how to make it do what I needed to do every single time. But yeah, so
Oh, wow,
that
we're
made
getting
me
all these
go like, oh,
secrets.
it can read. Yeah.
Oh
Several secrets.
my God, we're getting all this juicy behind the scenes. DevRel secrets. This is great. I had a
So
question for you. Oh, no, Charles.
yeah, sorry. So suppose someone is listening, they'd never heard of Copilot before. How can they get started and start using it? Maybe as a solo developer or as an enterprise. What are the different options out there?
Cool. Good question. We have Copilot for individuals and we got Copilot for business. Um, for a Copilot for individuals, that's like you want to buy or you want to get access to Copilot just for yourself. It is just so people know $10 a month. I mean on the GitHub side, we do gotta like host GPUs. It's a little expensive for us, so yeah, it is $10 a month. But I think it's worth it if you're a maintainer, an open source maintainer of a popular project or a student. You get it for free. You never will have to pay for that. But yeah, $10 a month and you get access to GitHub Copilot. Now, if you're an enterprise, we have Copilot for business. And the way that works is like anybody who's part of your GitHub team or organization, you have control on like providing them with GitHub Copilot access. That way you're not buying like individual subscriptions for each person. Like, and then once they leave the team or like whatever, you can easily turn it off. And then you also have the ability to like control like things behind the scenes. So like there's different like filters that we have. Like you could have the option to filter public code. Like you don't want any public code suggested to like your engineers. You can have that. That's by default turned off, but like you can control that behind the scenes for every single engineer on your team. So once you have either Copilot for individuals or Copilot for business as a subscription, you just install it as an extension in like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, or NeoVim or JetBrains. That was a lot,
All
but
right.
yeah.
Vim. That's interesting. What
I know,
about
right?
Emacs?
I don't think we have it for Emacs, but that would be interesting too.
Another show that I use Vim over Emacs. I used to use Vim over Emacs, so another reason why Vim is superior.
Yeah.
Moving on, in terms of corpus, could you tell us when you are asking GitHub Copilot a question, does your question code go to a public corpus? Like, what happens to that data? What happens to that information?
Okay. I believe there's an FAQ, but I believe that what happens is if you okay for a Copilot for business, we are not taking your data or telemetry or whatever, right? Because we want to make sure like everything is safe. So that's by default turned off. But for Copilot for individuals, it's turned on by default, and you will have to turn it off. But basically, what's happening is we look at we take your suggestion, it goes to the model, comes back to the editor, and we're looking at like, are you accepting these suggestions? That way we help to improve our model, right? Are you accepting or rejecting the suggestions? That's what I know. It's not like we're like grabbing the code and then like saving it for ourselves, like it's already trained on public code, but it's more like we're just evaluating, do you accept or reject these suggestions so that we can continue to improve. Does that make sense?
So maybe. So for the user who
Mhm.
is actually putting a prompt in,
Mhm.
you're not saving a prompt, but are you saving if they accepted it or not?
Yeah, that's what I know.
And just a final controversial question. You mentioned that the corpus is I know you probably get this all the time. You mentioned that the corpus is trained on public data. Is the is it still being trained on public data? Like if I open source a project, is that training the corpus? Like if I open source a project today, is it training the corpus?
I low key don't know all of that information, but I
Mhm.
believe they like the most recent training data. Hopefully this is right. I gotta double check. Is from March 2023. So like I think that it's, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think that OpenAI trains it periodically, but I don't think we should take my word for it because I'm not
Okay.
sure of that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was an honest answer. I mean, you brought it up, and so we were still curious about how Copilot is dealing with your data.
Yeah. And there's a GitHub Copilot FAQ too for folks that
We can put that in the notes. So if
yeah.
anyone has any other questions about Copilot, they can go and look at the FAQ.
Yeah, because it talks
Because I
about like
know,
privacy. Go ahead.
oh no, continue. Privacy.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say it talks about how it like uses your data and the privacy and like all the other questions that people often have. Sorry, go ahead though.
Oh no, that's us. No, that's it.
Cool.
Charles, do you have any
Um,
more questions? Yeah.
so yeah, looking into the future, could you tell us a bit about like where GitHub Copilot started and like where it's going? So like 6 months from now, a year from now, what can we expect? Are we
Yeah,
all
I
gonna
mean,
become
go
cyborg
ahead.
super developers?
Yeah,
Because
no,
that's
we're all gonna turn into cyborgs. No. I would say if you want to know where we're going next, is looking up githubnext.com. This is so we have like this team of researchers and software engineers who are like just experimenting with different tools, especially GitHub Copilot at this time. And they have a whole like projects roadmap. They talk about like, oh, is this in a work in progress or is this a usable prototype? So they talk about like, I guess right now this is the first time I'm seeing this GPT-4 with calc I don't know what that is, but I gotta look into that. But basically, like you can see all the different projects that they're working on, and where we can go. I think the in the future it's just gonna be like coding is gonna be more accessible for people. Like I feel like we try to make coding all like, oh, only really smart people do it,
I know.
but like it's just gonna be more accessible.
Oh, thank goodness. I can't tell you. Like, was when I first started coding, there was just all of this like mythology behind it. It was
Yeah,
all like this, oh, you have to start when you're like 5,
right.
or only certain people are born with it.
Yeah,
Or my favorite, I'm glad that there's less of this happening now than back in the day. There was like serious conversation if like women were able to like code, and it was sincere. Like they weren't trolling. They were like, "Oh, well, we don't know if your brain is equipped." Like I love that some of these you don't need to be a genius. A lot of
yeah.
the things that tripped us up were super trivial.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel your pain. I definitely feel your pain. At some past jobs, they were wilding. They were just saying whatever came out there.
They're wild.
I'm like, okay. They're like, oh man, you're not like a regular diversity candidate. I'm like, what?
Oh my gosh. I was even thinking about that. But they just because other developers would shame other like because I'm talking about developers who would shame those or like, "Oh, you started when you were in college? That's too late."
Like, okay, sure. Like anybody can code if they put their mind to it and they're determined. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of these tools just really put those like we said before, the mythology to rest, and it just
yeah,
makes it more accessible because all of us want to be builders. What else I
yeah.
like about Copilot, it gives me the satisfaction that I was not getting from low code tools.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because once again, I get tripped up on very simple stuff. And so I went to low and no code. But the thing with low and no code is you have to like learn their whole system.
Yeah. It's a whole nother
Yeah,
learning curve.
it's a whole nother learning curve and it's not as portable as like a
Yeah.
learning curve if you're learning a tech like Python or like JavaScript.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I did feel what, and sometimes it felt limiting. I felt like, can I only do what the low code system wants me to do? Like I can't do more than this. So yeah,
Yeah, no shade to low code, by the way.
no, no, not at all.
No, no, folks out there listening, you do your low and no code thing. But
Yeah,
I know for like for me who spent a lot and a lot of developers who spent a lot of time learning how to code, it's like, okay, how can I use this to solve this problem? And honestly, Copilot has been that bridge for me, and I'm really
Mhm.
thankful.
Yeah, agree. Me too. I feel like it gives me a little bit of a dopamine hit. Like I start getting really focused on like how can I write good comments and good code so Copilot can generate it. I want to see what it does.
My God, yes to the dopamine hit. And weekend projects actually
Yeah,
take a weekend.
right. Agree.
So, Roselle, thank you for. Oh, Charles, yep.
Yeah, one last question before we all disperse.
Mhm.
So Rizal, so there are many different ways or many different aspects of the coding process that we can use Copilot for.
Mhm.
Whether it's like starting the project as you showed us with that Markdown editor, or
Mhm.
like unit tests. What's your favorite um, like
Mm.
thing to do that Copilot has helped you, and you were like, wow, this is like really where my productivity went 10x?
It's a great question.
That is a really good question. I would say probably demos, because as a developer advocate, I got to do random demos sometimes, and like I don't have like a lot of time to build them, and it's usually in a technology that like people are assuming I know, but I don't know it. So I'd be like sweating. I'd be like, oh my gosh, let me just figure this out real quick. But now that I have Copilot, I'm like, all right, I think I could do this in 30 minutes. And then tomorrow they want me to do the demo, like it's gonna work out. Or even like just even like sometimes when I'm doing a demo, I'll get nervous and be like, oh my gosh, everybody's watching me and now I'm spelling things wrong. I'm like, I can just type, let Copilot do more of it for me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Just feeling a little bit more confident.
Nice. Is there any questions that we did not ask you that you'd like to answer?
There's no questions, but I do want to put another link of this blog post that I wrote about like prompt engineering or like prompt engineering with GitHub Copilot, just to help people like be able to get the best results from Copilot. But like I thought all the questions were really amazing, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And I think
Right.
there's so many people who are interested in Copilot, and definitely with those prompt engineering files. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Just in the interest of full disclosure, I used AI for all my questions, so none of those were me.
Love it.
He used AI for all of his questions. I actually did it the analog way and thought about it for a really long time.
That's all right. I do a mix all the time for Open Source Friday and all that. I was like, help me come up with a good title or help me come up with a question because I can't think of anything right now.
Yeah, so I'm not a real person. I'm part of the machines.
Oh my
Oh my
goodness.
God.
So on that note, Rizal, thank you so much for joining us. We had such a good time interviewing you, and we learned so much. And everyone who's watching, thank you for joining us. Rizal from Developer Advocate from GitHub. She's freaking amazing. You should follow her on Twitter. And your Twitter is something Bite. Black Girl Bite.
Yeah.
And she's super active on Twitter.
I'm addicted. Thank you so much, y'all. I had a great time as well, and thanks for the really great questions around Copilot.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Chill. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.